Allison, Marjorie's stepdaughter, slammed her champagne flute down mid-zoom. "You gave away my dad's house?" she shrieked, towels slipping from her spa-wet hair. Marjorie didn't flinch. She sipped her tea. Walter wanted it to serve people who showed up. Trevor, Allison's husband, barked, "We'll sue." Marjorie leaned in, calm as a verdict. "Then you'd better hurry. The ink's already dry." "Wait, before we go any further, I gotta ask, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe." The lilies had just arrived, white, full, opening at the edges like soft sighs. Marjorie adjusted them slightly on the dining room table, angling the vase so that Walter's photo caught the morning light behind it. She was smoothing the place cards for the reception when her phone buzzed. Allison, stepdaughter. She hesitated, then answered, "Marjorie, quick question." Allison's voice was all sun and froth, the kind that rarely paused to consider the weight of a day. Marjorie tucked the phone between her ear and shoulder, kept folding napkins. "Could we maybe push the funeral a few hours?" The air in the kitchen turned still. "Push it?" "Just a bit. I've got this spa thing. It's a full half day at Soleil. Facial, deep tissue, aromatherapy, like really intense. I booked it weeks ago and it's all non-refundable." Marjorie's hands stopped moving. Trevor's voice, half muted, called from the background. "Tell her it's the deluxe package. You can't just cancel that." "Right," Allison added, laughing a little. "And honestly, Dad wouldn't want us stressed, you know?" The silence that followed was long, heavy. "Marjorie?" She didn't reply. She just pressed end call, not in anger, in something much colder. The service proceeded at 11 a.m. the next day, just as Walter had wanted. No church, no fanfare, just a shaded outdoor space at the foothills and his urn resting on the oak pedestal he'd made in his garage. 12 chairs, 5 filled. Walter's best friend Joe was there, dressed in a suit 2 decades old and holding his weathered cowboy hat in his lap. 2 nurses from hospice showed up, quiet and respectful. A neighbor brought lemon bars and a single white rose, but no Allison, no Trevor. Marjorie stood without a tremor. "He was a good man," she said, her voice steady. "Not a loud man, but consistent. He loved with presence, not performance." She didn't mention the missed birthdays, or how Walter had quietly Venmo'd Allison for her branding consultant just 3 months before his cancer diagnosis. She didn't have to. The wind moved gently through the eucalyptus above them. Somewhere nearby, a bird called out once, then went silent. After the final prayer, Joe leaned in and said, "He'd be proud of how you handled this." Marjorie nodded once but didn't answer. Her eyes remained fixed on the closed urn. Walter's absence wasn't hollow. It was decisive. That night, after the guests had gone and the dishes were washed, she poured a glass of Cabernet and walked barefoot to the study. The house creaked in places that used to hold conversation. She opened the safe tucked behind the bookshelf, same code it had always been, 101950, their wedding date. The keypad beeped softly, obedient. Inside, Walter's cufflinks, their marriage certificate, and the will. She took it out gently, set it on the desk. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she stared at the embossed lettering on the folder. Walter E. King, Last Will and Testament. Her hand hovered above it like a reader over a page she's read before but not really seen. Behind her, the phone buzzed on the patio table. She turned toward it slowly, glass still in hand. On screen, a new Instagram notification from Allison. The photo showed tanned legs, spa robe, a mimosa held up like a trophy. Self-care queen, healing day, grief essay journey. No mention of the funeral, not even a name. Marjorie closed the safe, picked up the will. Her voice was calm, but final. "Let's begin." The morning after the service, Marjorie sat at the breakfast nook in her robe, a cooling cup of coffee in one hand and her reading glasses pushed halfway down her nose. The house was quiet again, but this quiet felt different. Hollow, like a room after a fight where no one apologized. She opened Instagram. Not out of habit, but because something in her bones told her to. The kind of instinct you earn after 72 years and too many held-in sighs. Allison's post was the first thing on the screen. It was a photo of her at the Soleil Spa, reclined on a chaise in a pristine white robe, her skin glowing under the golden desert light. A flute of champagne sparkled in her hand. Her caption read, "A day of restoration after an emotional week. Self-care queen, healing day, peace vibes only." No mention of Walter, no date, no funeral, just hashtags and soft lighting. Marjorie stared at it, the phone trembling slightly in her hand. Her finger hovered, not sure whether to zoom in or scroll past. She forced herself to keep reading. The next post came from Trevor, a filtered shot of their hotel suite balcony, mountains in the background, infinity pool in the foreground. "Life's too short to be sad. Choose joy. Stay elevated, wellness first." Below that, a carousel of spa treatments, foot soaks, fruit platters, cucumber eyes, his and hers massages. The only thing missing was remorse. She set the phone down, not gently. Marjorie stood up slowly and walked to the sliding glass door, staring out into the backyard where Walter's gardening gloves still rested on the potting bench. The desert wind stirred the rosemary bush he planted just 3 years ago, his retirement project, he'd called it, though it only grew after he stopped trying so hard. He'd been so proud of Allison. Too proud sometimes. He paid for her college even when she flunked her first year, co-signed her second car lease, funded that boutique candle startup that fizzled out in 6 months but made for pretty business cards. She'd called him Dad for Instagram, not for real life. The disrespect didn't hit all at once. It sank in slow, like sediment. That evening, Marjorie pulled out a yellow legal pad from the drawer in the study, the same one where Walter used to do the taxes. She wrote at the top, in block letters, "Alternate beneficiaries." She drew a line down the center. On the left, she wrote, "Who showed up?" On the right, "Who didn't?" Under "Who showed up," she listed Joe McAllister, hospice nurse Denise, Beverly from the reading program, a neighbor named Alma who brought lemon bars without being asked. Under "Who didn't," she wrote only 2 names, Allison and Trevor. She stared at those 2 names a long while, then drew a clean, thick line through them. The next morning, Marjorie stood outside the law office of Charles Gaines, Walter's longtime estate attorney. The building was brick and sun-faded, tucked between a dentist's office and a boutique tequila distillery. When she entered, the receptionist greeted her softly. "Mrs. King, Mr. Gaines said to send you straight in." Charles stood to greet her, buttoning his blazer. "I expected this call," he said gently, "but not this fast." Marjorie placed the yellow pad on the table. "I want to make changes," she said, her voice cool, unshaken. "Walter trusted her with too much. He trusted me to correct that if she didn't earn it." Charles nodded once. "We'll draft an amendment. It's your right." Marjorie glanced at the framed portrait of Walter on the bookshelf, his favorite fishing photo, holding up a small, unimpressive base with an oversized grin. "I won't let her turn his memory into content," she said. Charles picked up his pen. "Then let's turn it into something real." The call came just after Marjorie returned from the notary's office, her purse still heavy with copies of the updated trust paperwork. Her phone lit up with a name she hadn't seen since the morning of the funeral, Allison. Marjorie let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Marjorie," Allison's voice was honeyed with a practiced kind of concern. How are you holding up?" Marjorie walked to the window, where the sunlight sliced across Walter's favorite recliner. "As well as can be expected." A pause, then Trevor's voice entered the speaker line, loud and too casual. "We've just been trying to give you space, you know?" "Yes," Marjorie said dryly. "I noticed." Another pause. "So, Allison ventured, "Now that things are wrapping up, we were wondering if Mr. Gaines has been in touch about next steps, you know, for the estate." "Probate will take its course," Marjorie said, voice clipped like a file drawer closing. "No sense rushing it." "Oh no, of course not," Allison rushed. It's been really emotional for us, grieving in our own way." Trevor muttered something about energy blocks and emotional bandwidth, but Marjorie had already pulled the phone slightly away from her ear. She could hear the faint clink of wine glasses and soft jazz in the background. After the call, she opened Instagram again. Allison had posted a boomerang from the tasting patio at a vineyard outside Sedona. Caption: "Grieving is a process. Wine heals. Cirque spiritual reset." Trevor posted a close-up of a charcuterie board with the caption, "Dad would have wanted us to enjoy life. Gratitude journey. Just stay elevated. No apology, no accountability, just hashtags and curated ambiance." Marjorie didn't rage. She didn't cry. She walked into the study, retrieved the yellow legal pad again, and scratched a thick red X over the name Allison Marie King. The next morning, she returned to Mr. Gaines's office. He greeted her with a firm handshake and a weary smile. "I reviewed Walter's original documents. Allison is named, yes, but most of the estate hadn't yet been transferred. That gives us room." Marjorie reached into her handbag and placed a manila folder on his desk. "Let's set up a revocable living trust. Effective immediately." He glanced at her over his glasses. "Are you sure?" "She skipped her father's funeral," Marjorie said, "but posted about exfoliating, I'm sure." Over the next 2 hours, they worked through property titles, financial assets, Walter's pension, and personal effects. One by one, Marjorie reassigned each item with surgical precision. Some assets were moved to the trust, others were earmarked for charitable foundations or designated individuals. There were no dramatic speeches, only firm decisions. 2 days later, a floral delivery arrived on her front step, cream roses with a small card. "Sorry we couldn't be there. Walter was kind of like a dad." Allison and Trevor. Marjorie turned the card over. The signature was printed from a website, and Walter's name was spelled Walter. She stared at the arrangement for a long moment, then lifted it, carried it out to the green bin by the garage, and dropped it in without a word. That evening, she sat in her kitchen with a fresh pen and a clean copy of the trust document. Slowly, deliberately, she updated the recipient list. 3 names were added: Denise R., hospice nurse Alma B., neighbor Beverly H., reading program volunteer. Then she drew one neat line through the last entry on the original page: Allison M. King, removed at trustee's discretion. Her hand didn't shake. Marjorie pulled down the attic ladder with a quiet grunt, the soft groan of old wood echoing through the stillness of the house. Outside, Scottsdale's late sun painted long streaks across the floorboards, but up here, dust ruled, shadows and forgotten things. She hadn't touched Walter's storage corner since he passed. His labels, neat and slanted, still marked each box: camping gear, tax records 1987 to 2001, photos, Oregon. But what caught her eye was the leather suitcase wedged behind the insulation panels, familiar, scuffed, with one wheel missing. Walter had carried that thing on every road trip they ever took. She opened it slowly. The scent hit her first: cedar shavings and the soft tang of cologne that hadn't faded completely. Beneath a folded flannel shirt was an envelope, thick, yellowed at the edges, labeled in pen, "For M, if I go first." Inside were pages, some typed, others handwritten, each dated over the last 2 years. May 3rd, Allison starting another business. Holistic scented journals. I gave her $5,000. Again. She hugged me for Instagram. Not after. August 22nd. She told Marjorie she'd visit, then posted poolside pics instead. "Grief is complicated," she wrote. "Not when you've skipped showing up." November 10th. If I'm gone before we fix the will, I trust Marjorie will do what I didn't. She sees clearer than I do, always has. Marjorie's hands trembled slightly, not from sorrow, from vindication. She sat back on her heels, gripping one of Walter's old sweatshirts, and let out a long, quiet breath. The house below her was silent, more so than ever. She could hear the wind pressing gently against the windows, like it wanted to come in and bear witness. Downstairs, she laid the letters on the dining table. Beside them, she placed a pile of receipts she'd uncovered earlier. Payments Walter made to Allison: $3,200 for wellness branding, $1,450 for web design, $6,800 labeled only emergency. All paid, all forgotten, until now. She pulled out a new notebook, the kind with a hard black cover and a ribbon bookmark, and wrote at the top, "Estate Review. Truth before transfer." Then she began inventorying Walter's belongings, not with grief, but with precision. His watch collection, his antique fishing gear, the autographed Dodgers baseball he refused to let anyone touch. Each item was sorted: donate, keep, legacy display. When she reached the bookshelf in the den, she paused. Hidden behind the large print atlas was a slim blue folder titled Funeral Preferences. Marjorie. It was hers. Updated 5 years ago. She skimmed it once, then sat down and rewrote it from scratch. No memorial in some sterile hall, no flowers from people who didn't know her middle name, just a small gathering under open sky with music, not hymns, but her favorite blues vinyls. She tucked the updated version beside her estate documents, then opened her laptop. To Allison King, subject Tuesday. Message: let's talk face to face. I'd prefer in person. 10 a.m. She hesitated for only a breath before hitting send. Later that evening, while pouring herself a glass of lemon water, her phone pinged with a reply. "Can we do Zoom instead? I'll be in Sedona. Trevor got us a chakra alignment thing." Marjorie stared at the screen. The fridge hummed softly behind her. Outside, a cactus wren called once and fluttered off. She didn't sigh, didn't mutter, just smiled, tight-lipped, eyes sharp. She walked to the front hallway, placed Walter's letters into a fireproof file, and locked it. Marjorie adjusted her reading glasses and tilted the webcam. On her end, everything was crisp. Mahogany desk, porcelain teacup, a tidy legal folder arranged beside Mr. Gaines, who sat at her dining table in a navy suit. Silent, prepared. Across the connection, chaos. Allison's camera came into focus. Luxury hotel room, half-unpacked suitcase behind her, face dewy and cheeks flushed from a facial. She was wrapped in a white towel embroidered with the logo of a Sedona resort. Her champagne flute caught the sun like a prop in a commercial. Trevor leaned in from the side, shirtless, holding a phone and smirking like a man too proud of nothing. "Marge," Allison greeted, bright and breathy. "You look so serious." Mr. Gaines cleared his throat. "We appreciate you both joining us today," he said, his tone clipped but polite. "We're here to review the updated estate summary following Walter's passing." Allison waved a manicured hand dismissively. "Let's just cut to the inheritance part. We've got a sound bath in an hour." Marjorie blinked once, then reached for her tea. Earl Grey, steeped just right. She didn't speak yet. Trevor scoffed. "No offense, but we were expecting a formal process, not a kitchen Zoom with grandma vibes." "None taken," Marjorie said, her voice cool as marble. "I find formality isn't about setting, it's about substance." Mr. Gaines laid the document flat. "This is the revised summary of assets as of 2 weeks ago. The will has been adjusted, and key items moved into a charitable remainder trust. Walter's house, for instance, is no longer privately inheritable." Allison leaned forward. "Wait, what does that mean?" "It means the house is gone," Trevor said, suddenly alert. "Gone as in, Marjorie cut in gently, "permanently committed to a charitable foundation to support hospice and elder care. Walter and I discussed it before he passed." "You can't do that," Allison snapped, sitting up straighter in the towel. "I already did," Marjorie replied, sipping calmly. Trevor leaned toward the camera, voice rising. "This is retaliation. She's emotional and unstable. This is because of one spa day?" "One funeral," Marjorie corrected. "One that mattered. One your wife skipped." Allison's cheeks darkened. "You're punishing me for not canceling a facial." "No," Marjorie said, voice steady. "I'm honoring the man you chose not to show up for. Actions write legacies, not bloodlines." Mr. Gaines shuffled the papers. "All documents have been signed, witnessed, and filed. This is not only legal, it's finalized." Trevor's mouth opened, but no words came out at first. Then, "We'll challenge this. We'll go to court." Marjorie set her teacup down and met the camera dead on. Try. The silence was thick. Even through the screen it hummed with tension. Trevor stared. Allison fidgeted, her towel slipping slightly. No one reached to stop the embarrassment. Mr. Gaines continued. There are still modest financial provisions for Allison, but the bulk of the estate is now designated for active service organizations and scholarship funds under the Walter King Trust. Allison's voice cracked. He would have wanted me taken care of. Marjorie's eyes softened just enough. He did. He paid for your mistakes, again and again, but wishes evolve. So do documents. Trevor stood up abruptly, storming off-screen. A door slammed in the distance. Allison's eyes welled up, not with sorrow, but with insult. You're going to regret this, she muttered, when you're alone, when you need us. Marjorie gave a small, serene smile. I've never needed what won't show up. By Wednesday morning, Marjorie's phone buzzed relentlessly. Her group text with her community center book club had lit up. Have you seen what Allison posted? She tagged you, Margie. That girl needs a mirror, not a microphone. Marjorie exhaled and tapped the link. The video opened on Allison, full lashes and flawless contour, sitting in front of a ring light. Behind her, a backdrop of pink cherry blossoms and luxury candle jars. She sniffled once, dramatically. Some people don't understand that grief looks different for everyone, she said. Just because I didn't perform it like a Hallmark card doesn't mean I didn't love my dad. Some people are just vindictive, especially when they're old and bitter. The caption read, sometimes the people who raised you become strangers. Truth teller. Or generational trauma. Blocked but blessed. The comments rolled in fast. Half sympathetic. You deserve healing, queen. Toxic elders are real. The other half, less so. This about the funeral you skipped for a spa day? Your dad deserved better. Sis read the room. Marjorie didn't comment. She didn't reply. She simply closed the app, set the phone face down, and slipped on her cardigan. Thursdays were for volunteering, and the children's reading hour at the Scottsdale Community Center didn't pause for social media drama. As she walked through the center's doors, the scent of glue sticks and graham crackers hit her like a warm embrace. Mrs. Delgado, the center's director, beamed. We've got a new reader today, she said. Miss Marjorie? They're excited. Marjorie nodded. Let's do Charlotte's Web. Walter loved that one. Half an hour later, she sat in the story circle, surrounded by 6 eager faces. One boy, maybe 6, leaned his head on her knee as she read about friendship and sacrifice and small brave things. When she closed the book, he whispered, Can you come next week too? I'll be here, she said, her voice steadier than it had been in days. That night, at her writing desk, she opened her leather journal. The paper was thick, cream-colored, and smelled faintly of cedar. She wrote, Silence is not surrender. It's strategy. Her pen hovered a second longer. Then she added, Retaliation is loud. Dignity is patient. The phone rang. She answered on the second ring. Gaines, the familiar baritone said. We're almost through with the filings, but they've submitted a temporary motion, some sort of undue influence nonsense. Marjorie closed her journal calmly. Of course they did. It won't stick, he added. The documents are solid, but it might stall the process a few weeks. She walked to the window. Outside, the desert wind was beginning to stir, rustling the Palo Verde leaves along the garden wall. Let them stall, she said. It won't change the ending. There was a long pause. You're not shaken, are you? I'm 72 years old, Lawrence, she replied. I've buried a husband. I've survived a war, a pandemic, and childbirth. Do you think a petty motion from a man who yells at baristas is going to undo me? He chuckled. Point taken. After the call, Marjorie opened the old walnut cabinet by her piano. Inside was a flash drive in a velvet box and an envelope labeled Final Will, Private Version Number 2. She placed both on the table next to her laptop. Then she hit record. Her eyes looked directly into the camera lens, unblinking. If you're watching this, she began, then the drama has already passed. I didn't raise Allison, I didn't shape her choices, but I did choose my own. She paused, and in the end, I chose peace. I chose Walter. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature but in atmosphere. Quiet tension clung to the oak-paneled walls like humidity before a desert storm. Marjorie King walked in with a posture carved from time, pride, and endurance. Navy suit tailored to her figure, modest pearl studs, silver hair swept into a French twist. Her heels clicked once per step, deliberate, controlled. Her presence turned heads, not because she demanded attention, but because dignity rarely entered with such clarity. She sat beside Mr. Gaines, placing a leather folder on the table. She didn't fidget. She didn't glance toward the other side of the aisle. Allison made her entrance 10 minutes late, wearing oversized designer sunglasses, a velour tracksuit the color of melted sorbet, and a visible pout. Trevor followed, aggressively scrolling his phone like he was too important for judicial matters. They looked more ready for brunch than battle. Marjorie didn't blink. Judge Leclerc took the bench with a gravel-toned, "We are here to determine the validity of the amended estate and trust documents of the late Walter King." Trevor stood immediately. "Your Honor, this entire thing is based on retaliation. Marjorie changed the will after a disagreement. This is emotional. It's personal. She's punishing Allison for not rearranging a spa day." "Is that your legal argument?" the judge asked flatly, one eyebrow raised. Trevor cleared his throat. "We believe she's acting irrationally, possibly under duress, and shouldn't have sole control of the estate's direction." Gaines rose calmly, adjusted his tie. "Your Honor, we have no intention of wasting the court's time. The changes to Mr. King's estate were made over several months, in accordance with Arizona law, and witnessed appropriately. We've also submitted evidence showing clear premeditated updates." He tapped a folder. "Exhibits A through D." Judge Leclerc flipped through the documents with judicial disinterest until she reached the USB stick labeled Exhibit E, Final Message. Gaines nodded. "If it pleases the court, the late Mr. King left a voice memo. His final instructions to Marjorie. It was saved 4 days before his death." The audio played in the hushed room. Walter's voice crackled softly. "Take care of Marjorie. Don't let them bleed you, honey. I know you'll want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but they don't want you. They want what's left. Be smarter than I was. Love, but don't be fooled. And for God's sake, don't postpone anything for Allison's spa days." A quiet gasp from the gallery. Trevor's eyes widened. Allison's jaw dropped. "Objection!" Trevor barked. "This is out of context." Judge Leclerc didn't even look up. "Overruled." Marjorie remained still, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't smile. That would have been too easy. After 20 minutes of rebuttals that sounded more like personal grievances than legal logic, the judge leaned forward. "The will and trust stand. There is no credible evidence of coercion or undue influence. The charitable remainder trust is irreversible, and the court finds Mrs. King fully competent and within her legal rights." Her gavel struck once, a final chord in a symphony of entitlement unraveling. Outside the courthouse, the Arizona sun was merciless. Cameras gathered fast, reporters jockeying for quotes. Allison shoved past them with her head ducked and Trevor yelling, "This isn't over!" Marjorie stepped calmly into the light, facing the microphones with poise. "He's gone," she said quietly, "but his values aren't. And that's what matters." Flashes popped. A reporter shouted, "Mrs. King, what would you say to other seniors facing family pressure during grief?" She paused for the first time. "I'd say, write it down, seal it up, and never underestimate the power of a paper trail." Later that evening, back at home, she logged into her email and found a message from a name she didn't recognize. Subject line, "Thank you, Ms. King." The message read, "Your story made me rethink my will today. I'd been silent too long. You gave me the nudge. Thank you for choosing dignity." The morning light spilled across Marjorie's kitchen like honey, warm and too honest. It danced over a spread of old photo albums, pages fanned open like chapters of a book she'd long outgrown. The coffee in her mug had gone cold. She stared at the photos from Walter's memorial, printed in matte finish. There was Mr. Dunn from Walter's chess club, Mary and Frank from church, even sweet Andrea from the grocery store who'd shown up with homemade lemon bars. But no Allison. Not even a glimpse in the background. No Trevor either. Like they'd never existed in that part of his life. Like ghosts who hadn't earned the right to haunt. She exhaled slowly, picked up her glasses and moved to the den. There, on the shelf wedged between Walter's books on Stoicism and one dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, sat an old laptop. Dusty, but loyal. She opened it and logged into the email account they'd once shared. She scrolled through messages long archived and forgotten, receipts, newsletters, garden club notifications, until she saw it. Subject, just in case, from Walter King. Date, 3 months before his death. The email was short. Lovey, if they can't be bothered in death, they don't deserve legacy. You always know what's right. I trust you to make it count. W. She read it twice, then a third time, just to hear his voice again in her head. That familiar pause he made after legacy, like he'd meant more than money. Marjorie closed the laptop gently, like sealing a door that no longer needed to be open. That afternoon, she met Beverly at the local cafe by the canal, the one with tables that wobbled slightly, but made up for it with pecan scones. Beverly, already mid-scone, greeted her with a raised brow. "You've got that look," she said. "What look?" "The one that says someone's about to receive a life-altering check." Marjorie smiled faintly. "Close. I want to set up a private placement fund for hospice nurses in Walter's name." Beverly stopped chewing. "God, that's good. You sure you're not a silent philanthropist?" "I'm not silent," Marjorie replied. "I've just become selective." They spent the next hour sketching it out, an endowment structured for long-term disbursement, benefiting caregivers who often faded into the background while holding families together. That night, Marjorie sat at her desk, fingers poised over the keyboard, beginning Chapter 1 of what she would title Legacy Without Apology. The memoir was part record, part reckoning, every word, a thread unspooling. Halfway through her outline, her phone buzzed. "Allison, can we start over?" Marjorie stared at the screen. No hello, no apology, just a request that assumed the door was still there. She typed slowly. "Marjorie, you'll have to. I already have." She stared at the blinking cursor for a long second, then hit send. A moment later, she opened her contact list, found Allison's name, and hit delete. Then she went one step further. Settings greater than phone, greater than number change. Clean break. The next morning, she met with her real estate broker. The backup property Walter had bought years ago, just in case. Allison ever needed a fresh start sat vacant on the edge of town. Modern, neutral, move-in, ready. "She's been asking about it again," the broker mentioned casually. "Your name's still on the deed." "Not for long," Marjorie replied. By the end of the day, it was sold. The funds, every cent, went directly into the hospice fund, now named the Walter King Compassion Grant. When the broker handed over the final papers, Marjorie didn't blink. "I hope someone deserving sleeps well there," she said. As she walked back to her car, wind lifted her scarf just enough to let her feel the chill on her collarbone. She looked up. The Arizona sky was impossibly wide, brushed with soft streaks of coral. In the quiet hum of the car, she pulled out her phone and bookmarked a florist's site. She had an idea for a new tradition. The letters were printed on linen paper, the kind that held ink like it meant something. Marjorie folded each one by hand, pressing the creases slowly. She had always believed that the way you give something is as important as what you give. There were 4 envelopes on her kitchen counter, each with a name written in her steady cursive: Denise Hanley, Beverly Lowe, Malik Thomas, Elena Cruz. She laid them side by side and took a breath that felt like closure. Denise, Walter's hospice nurse, had never raised her voice, even when Walter had been in pain and refusing medication. She'd sat with him at 3 a.m., whispering stories about her father's garden, holding his hand until sleep softened the pain. Her letter read simply, "Denise, you brought dignity to the hardest days. You showed up. That's why you matter." Beverly's was longer, Marjorie's way of saying what had gone unspoken between them. You gave me friendship without condition, and laughter when I'd forgotten how it sounded. This legacy is part yours now. The other 2 letters went to scholarship recipients, students who had written essays for the Walter King Compassion Grant. One wanted to be a hospice social worker, the other a nurse in rural care. Both essays had made Marjorie cry, not from grief, but from the strange hope that Walter's kindness hadn't stopped breathing just because he had. She slid the letters into their envelopes, sealed each one with a gentle press, and placed them into a small box alongside a copy of the updated trust summary. Then she carried it to the post office herself, refusing to let someone else mail something this personal. The clerk, a young woman with fading purple hair and a tired smile, weighed the box and asked, "Anything fragile, perishable, or irreplaceable?" Marjorie smiled faintly. "Yes, but send it anyway." Back home, she poured a single glass of wine and opened her laptop. Her inbox was quiet, save for one message from Mr. Gaines confirming receipt of the final filings and a backup scan of the beneficiary letters for archive. Another message blinked from the grant platform. Essay submissions received, round 2. She clicked through the student essays, stories of hardship, healing, and a recurring thread of one phrase: legacy isn't what you leave, it's how you leave people. Every sentence was another thread tying Walter's values to someone else's future. Later that evening, she sat on the couch with Beverly, who had stopped by unannounced with a pie and a bottle of ginger ale. Beverly unfolded her letter slowly, reading it aloud, voice catching halfway through. "No one's ever done this for me," she said, wiping under her glasses. "Not even my own kids." Marjorie didn't reply right away. She just reached over and placed her hand on Beverly's. It was enough. Across town, unnoticed by either of them, Allison posted a story to her social media. A moody selfie, the caption reading, "Sometimes family is who you choose." No likes, no comments. Marjorie would never see it. Her new number wasn't connected to any of them anymore, but even if it had been, she wouldn't have reacted. Instead, she walked out to the back garden with her journal in hand, sat under the string lights Walter had hung for her 3 anniversaries ago, and wrote a single line: "Chosen family exists. So does chosen legacy." Then she closed the book, breathed in the scent of the rosemary bush beside her, and exhaled the past one last time. It wasn't supposed to bloom until late spring, but there it was, velvety red, defiant against the last chill of March. Marjorie stood barefoot on the back porch, coffee in hand, the morning air still wrapped in a cold that smelled faintly of soil and citrus. The rosebush shimmered with dew, its petals wide open, like something waiting to be noticed. She walked to it slowly, careful not to spill her drink. Walter had planted that bush on their 20th anniversary. It had nearly died 3 winters ago when he'd forgotten to cover it. She'd teased him about it for weeks. Now it stood taller than her knees, rich with color, thriving. There were ghosts in this garden, but not the haunting kind. Just the type that whispered through the rustle of lavender or pressed their scent into the thyme leaves when she brushed past. This was the space she and Walter had built together. It was where they fought over mulch brands, kissed over peach cobbler, sat in silence after the news of his diagnosis. Today it felt like the garden was speaking back. She knelt near the old tool shed, looking for the hand rake he always used. As she opened the drawer built into the workbench, something fluttered up and caught against her wrist, an envelope, aged brown and soft at the corners. It was addressed simply, "For M when the garden's yours." Her breath caught. Inside was a short, careful note in Walter's spidery script. "Thank you for never giving up on us. I never deserved that kind of loyalty, but you gave it anyway." Her hand went to her chest. She sat down on the cool cement floor of the shed and wept. Not the sobs of fresh grief, but the ache of remembering something fully and letting it hurt. When the tears dried, she walked back to the porch and took out her journal. The words came without effort, like the poem had been waiting behind that letter all along. She titled it, "A Better Goodbye." It spoke of roots, of grief that didn't demand permission, of love that lingered in petal and rain. It was raw, but kind, honest. Heron, she typed it later that day and made it the final page of her memoir, right after the chapter titled, "The Day I Let Go Without Losing." The page before it bore a photo, Walter in the garden, sleeves rolled, face smudged with dirt, smiling at something just out of frame, likely her. By the end of the week, she'd decided, the garden, with its raised beds and shaded benches, would become something more. With Beverly's help and a few calls to the city council, they started the paperwork to register it as a local memorial space, open to hospice families, caregivers, anyone needing a quiet place to remember or simply breathe. They named it Walter's Grove. Beverly painted a sign. A neighbor donated mulch. The first visitors arrived the day after the paper ran a short feature, "Widow Turns Grief into Legacy." Marjorie sat near the bench Walter had built, pretending to read but really watching. A hospice patient, frail, face drawn but eyes sharp, walked slowly through the rows of sage and rosemary. She paused at the small nameplate staked near the rosebush. It read, "Walter King, husband, listener, root keeper." The woman reached out, touched the plaque like it might hum, and whispered, "Thank you." Marjorie closed her book. She rose, walked to the rosebush, and answered softly, "You're welcome." It was enough. That evening, as twilight painted the sky with lavender and blue, she walked the edges of the garden. She trimmed the basil, watered the marigolds, picked a tomato just starting to ripen. The air smelled like green things growing and peace earned. She went inside, printed her poem on thick paper, and framed it. Then she placed it beside the guest book at the garden's edge. Marjorie planned a gratitude dinner. The dining room gleamed under the soft shimmer of vintage sconces and candlelight, each flicker casting golden shadows over polished oak. The table was set with care, not extravagance. Handwritten place cards rested beside wine glasses, each one bearing the name of someone who had earned their seat through presence, not proximity. Marjorie adjusted a sprig of rosemary on the folded linen napkins. The scent reminded her of the dinners she and Walter used to host, their laughter slow and easy, the clink of forks against china a quiet music of its own. But tonight, it wasn't about memories. It was about rewriting the ending. She'd called it a gratitude supper. No gifts, no speeches required, just a gathering of those who'd shown up, consistently, sincerely. No Allison, no Trevor, just peace. Denise arrived first, dressed simply in a navy cardigan, her arms full of fresh peonies. "He always liked these," she said, placing them in a vase by the window. "He did," Marjorie said, "and you remembered." One by one, the guests filtered in. Beverly brought a batch of homemade shortbread. Jordan, one of the scholarship recipients, arrived in an oversized blazer that didn't quite fit but made his pride visible. Emily, the second student, clutched her invitation like it might disappear. Dinner was warm, earthy, roasted chicken with lemon and thyme, caramelized carrots, garlic mashed potatoes, comfort, plated. The chatter started tentative but grew stronger with each course. Laughter spilled into corners of the house that had once echoed with silence. Marjorie didn't dominate the room. She floated through it, collecting small moments the way Walter once collected jazz vinyls, quietly, reverently. After dessert, Beverly stood and raised her glass. "To the woman who chose presence over performance, who honored grief without bitterness, and who gave us all something to believe in again." Glasses clinked. Marjorie didn't speak immediately. She let the silence settle like a quilt before rising. "I've been told legacy is about who you leave things to," she said slowly, voice steady. "But I've come to learn, it's really about who showed up, who stayed, who listened when no one was talking." She walked over to a small stack of cloth-bound books tied with twine, her memoir, A Better Goodbye. Each guest received a copy, and each one opened to a note tucked in the back, a folded page in Walter's familiar script. "Legacy isn't who we leave it to. It's who deserves it. If you're reading this, you do." Denise brought her hand to her mouth. Beverly whispered, "He wrote this?" "He did," Marjorie said, her voice catching just once. "Year ago, before any of this." Tears welled in Emily's eyes. Jordan blinked hard behind thick glasses. Nobody's ever said I deserved anything. Marjorie took a step closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. Then let this be the first time, not the last. The room shifted. No longer just a dinner party. It became a binding moment, a vow unspoken. In the corner, an old camera clicked. A guest had captured them all mid-laughter, mid-life. Later, while rinsing dishes in the quiet of the kitchen, Marjorie's phone buzzed on the counter. A new email subject line lit the screen. Estate Ethics Panel Invitation. We read your memoir. She dried her hands, lifted her glasses, and tapped out a reply. Only if I can bring a dozen chairs with me. The printer hummed to life like a distant whisper of reckoning. Marjorie stood barefoot in her den, morning light pouring in through gauzy curtains. She watched the machine slowly spit out a piece of paper that didn't belong in a filing cabinet, but in a frame. The email had sat in her inbox for weeks, buried beneath condolences and estate paperwork. It had come through the shared billing account Walter had once set up just for family things, and there it was. Sundara Wellness Retreat, total, $290, spa and signature facial. Date, June 14th, 11:45 a.m., the exact hour Walter's urn had been lowered into the ground. Marjorie didn't cry. She didn't shake. Instead, she pulled a silver frame from a bottom drawer, once meant for a wedding photo, and slid the receipt inside. It fit perfectly. She placed it on the shelf above her desk, next to the notarized final will and the bound copy of her memoir. The spa receipt didn't need a caption. It already told a story. A gust of air stirred the curtains. Outside, the roses bloomed heavy and low, their petals brushing the soil like they knew grief from root to thorn. Marjorie sat down and pulled out a thick piece of cream stationery from her drawer. She uncapped her fountain pen slowly, deliberately. The first line came easily. Dear Allison, I almost didn't write this. But silence, while powerful, sometimes needs a witness. She didn't mention the money, not directly. She wrote about chairs left empty, voices never heard, the sound of dirt hitting wood, and how dignity doesn't arrive late or dressed in white robes sipping cucumber water. Each word was careful, not cruel, not barbed, just final. She signed her name without flourish, folded the page, slipped it into an envelope, and without hesitation wrote in bold black marker, "Unsent Truths." She opened the bottom drawer of her filing cabinet, tucked the letter inside, and locked it with a soft metallic click. That drawer now held things that no longer deserved light. Spa receipts, empty apology cards, copies of Allison's social media posts captioned, "Self-care isn't selfish." She turned off the lamp on her desk and exhaled. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like she was holding her breath inside her own home. Later that night, under the cotton hush of her bedsheets, Marjorie slept through the entire night. No waking at 2 a.m. to stare at the ceiling, no silent rehearsals of what she wished she'd said, no need to explain grief to the ungrieving. When she woke, the world felt gently rearranged, softer. Even the tea kettle's whistle sounded less like a scream and more like a song. Her phone buzzed on the countertop. Beverly, as usual, texted early. "Want to walk tomorrow? Just us." Marjorie smiled, her thumbs dancing with calm conviction. Let's walk like we own the street. She put the phone down and opened her laptop to check a few emails, one of them from a publishing house assistant who'd read her memoir. Subject, co-authorship inquiry, ethical estate planning series. Message, we're launching a senior-focused series on legacy and legal empowerment. We'd love your voice. Would you consider co-writing a book with us? Marjorie stared at the screen, not in disbelief, but in recognition. This, too, was legacy, not the marble plaque or courtroom win, but this quiet ripple that moved from page to page, hand to hand. She reached for her calendar, flipped past Allison's birthday with no hesitation, and circled next Thursday in blue ink. Say yes to the things that return the favor, she whispered to herself. And this time, she did. The sky over Oregon wasn't dramatic that morning. It was clean. crisp blue stretching across ridgelines like pressed linen, soft mist retreating from the trail's edge as if it, too, understood boundaries. Marjorie stood at the base of the mountain path, one hand gripping the urn, the other tucked inside the pocket of her fleece-lined jacket. The trailhead sign was weather-worn, its paint chipped, but she'd recognize it anywhere. "This is it," she murmured. "No cameras. No hashtags. Just us. Walt." Her boots crunched the gravel as she climbed. With each step, the ache in her knees reminded her she wasn't 20 anymore, but her pace was steady, measured like the woman she'd become in his absence. The trail wound through evergreens, the scent of pine and damp earth thick in the air. A jaybird called from above, its cry sharp and solitary. Walter used to say nature didn't need to shout to be heard. It just needed you to shut up and listen. After 40 minutes, she reached the overlook. The valley opened beneath her like an unwritten page, layers of green and gold falling into one another, the Pacific wind combing through the treetops. The spot had always been their favorite. They'd sat here once eating peanut butter sandwiches, Walter laughing about how no mountain view could outshine her glare when he left the car keys behind. Now she knelt on the edge of the bluff, unlatched the urn, and paused. "Everyone thinks you were the quiet one," she whispered, unscrewing the lid. "But I remember what you said to me that night in hospice. Don't let them dilute you." "I didn't, Walt. I didn't flinch." She tilted the urn. Ash, soft and gray, spiraled into the wind like silk unraveling. Some caught on her sleeve, some scattered instantly. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she watched until the last trace vanished into the sky. From her pocket, she took out a tiny camera. One click, a single photo. The view, the shadow of her hand holding the urn and nothing else. It was for her locket, not for sharing, not for memory hunters who hadn't shown up when it mattered. Back at the lodge that evening, she sat by the window printing the photo. She trimmed the edges neatly and slid it into her locket, next to a faded photo of Walter in a flannel shirt and hiking boots. Together again. Silently, simply, without audience. When she returned home to Scottsdale, the Arizona heat hit like a slap, but her heart didn't tighten this time. The grief didn't choke her. It stepped aside, respectfully. That week, she spent every afternoon creating the photo book. Pages of smiles, of gardens, of moments that would have gone undocumented if she'd waited for others to appreciate them. She titled it in bold serif, "We Showed Up." The cover image? Walter's hiking boots and hers side by side on the porch the morning after their first Oregon trip. He had insisted on photographing their shoes, saying, "People always take pictures of faces, but it's the feet that tell you who walked the journey." She closed the finished book, tied a red ribbon around it, and slid it into a padded envelope. On the front, she wrote in her careful script, "To the Walter Hospice Foundation. May these steps carry more than one story." At the mailbox, she hesitated for a second, then, with calm hands, dropped it in. Behind her, a hummingbird darted between blossoms, fast, bright, gone. But she didn't need to chase it. She'd already arrived. Marjorie stared at the blank page on her laptop. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat, steady, expectant. She'd already titled it, "Legacy Without Guilt. A Companion for Women Who Chose Peace Over Pleasing." She inhaled slowly, fingers hovering over the keys. The smell of fresh rosemary drifted in through the open window. Outside, Max, the hospice nurse's terrier, barked at a butterfly. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime rang, soft and clear. Her first line came not from thought, but memory. "You are not selfish for protecting what you've built." Writing the workbook didn't come with fanfare or deadlines. It came with mornings on the porch, tea steeped strong and pages printed warm. Every chapter held a part of her story, yes, but more importantly, it held the questions she wished someone had asked her. How do you know when to rewrite a will? What does boundary setting look like in grief? Is it love if it's only inherited? She included exercises, spaces for women to list who showed up and who didn't, prompts that asked, what part of your legacy must go with you and what part must stay for others? She never named Allison, not once. The point wasn't vengeance anymore. It was clarity. 2 weeks after uploading a draft, an editor from a local publishing imprint called, "We think there's something powerful here, accessible, honest." "I'm not a professional writer," Marjorie said. "You are now," the editor replied. The same month, a documentary crew, filming a segment for Planned Grace, a hospice legacy series, invited her to speak. They wanted a shot of her garden, the memorial plaque by the rose bushes, and the framed quote in her study, "Silence is not surrender, it's strategy." She almost declined. Then she remembered Beverly's voice. "You didn't burn the bridge. You built a better one and didn't send them the directions." So she said yes. The morning of filming, she wore Walter's old cardigan over a pale blue blouse, a quiet nod to the man who'd taught her the difference between loyalty and obligation. In the interview, when asked how she found the courage to change everything so late in life, she smiled softly. "I didn't change everything," she answered. "I changed what wasn't worthy of staying." The footage later showed her sitting by her favorite rosebush, her fingers gently brushing a bloom. "Legacy isn't what you leave behind," she said to the camera. "It's what lives forward in people who earned it." The video aired regionally, then gained unexpected traction online. Messages flooded in. One read, "I just canceled an inheritance meeting and called my daughter instead. Thank you." Another, "You gave me language I didn't know I needed." Especially the right to say no. Marjorie began holding small Sunday workshops at the community center. 5 widows turned into 12, then 20. Denise co-led the sessions and helped organize afternoon tea. "I thought my voice got buried with him," one woman said during a session. Marjorie shook her head. "It didn't. It just needed somewhere quieter to be heard." Evenings became sacred. She'd walk barefoot through the garden, warm dirt and rose petals underfoot. Sometimes she'd pause by the new bench they'd placed beneath the lemon tree. The breeze would tug at her sleeves, just enough to remind her the seasons were moving forward. One twilight, she sat with Beverly on the porch, both sipping ginger tea. The horizon bled orange and pink. Cicadas buzzed low and constant. "You did it, Marge," Beverly said quietly. "You broke the cycle." Marjorie didn't answer right away. Her gaze drifted over the garden, the golden light bathing everything she'd fought to protect. In the hush, a memory arrived, not sharp, not ghostly, just a familiar echo. Walter's voice, gentle in her ear. "You rewrote the ending." The Arizona sun had begun its descent when Allison's phone lit up with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated, answered. A clipped voice on the other end said, "Ms. King? This is Jordan Fry, representing the estate of Walter and Marjorie King. I'm calling regarding the final trust distribution." Silence. Then, "Okay, so when do I receive my portion?" Jordan didn't flinch. "You won't. You are not listed as a beneficiary." The words landed like glass shattering across a marble floor. "What?" Her voice rose. "There has to be some mistake. She said it wasn't personal." "It wasn't," the lawyer replied calmly. "It was legal. The trust is sealed and irrevocable. There is no challenge process." Somewhere in the background, Trevor's voice cut in, "Who was that?" But Allison had already turned the phone over on the granite countertop, screen down like a funeral lid. She sat there in her designer kitchen, framed by muted beige tones and Art Deco lighting. The island she once imagined celebrating over now felt too long, too cold. Meanwhile, in a modest office 1,000 miles north, Denise was cutting a green ribbon with trembling fingers. The plaque above the glass door gleamed in the late afternoon sun. The Walter Room, a hospice for dignity, not deadlines. It smelled of lavender and warm bread. Inside, volunteers handed out tea, and a soft playlist of jazz and piano swelled beneath quiet conversations. On the wall, a black and white photograph of Walter holding a book and smiling stood beside a quote in calligraphy. "Kindness, given freely, lasts longer than anything in a will." Denise turned to the small crowd gathered, former caregivers, donors, patients' families, and spoke softly. "This place exists because someone noticed who showed up. Not just for her, but for the man she loved." In the crowd, a woman wiped tears and whispered to another, "That's the legacy I want someday." Far from Scottsdale, Marjorie sat by a still lake at a quiet retreat in Jackson Hole. The air was cool, pine-laced, and impossibly clear. Beverly sat beside her, their chairs sunk slightly into the soft, uneven earth. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Beverly said, "Funny, isn't it? All the noise they made. And now? Just silence." Marjorie didn't laugh, but she did smile. That calm, earned smile of someone who'd played the long game and won by choosing peace over pettiness. "The loudest echo," she said, "comes after the door's shut for good." In her lap sat the final print copy of her memoir. The one that had gone viral after a book club in Vermont, shared it on social media. Legacy Without Guilt, a story of boundaries, grief, and grace. Comments had flooded in. One widow wrote, "This helped me forgive myself for saying no." Another, "I changed my will last night. Thank you for showing me I could." Still, Marjorie hadn't replied to any of them. She didn't need to. She'd already spoken, on every page. That night, in her cabin, she placed a single rose petal inside the final journal she kept. Next to it, she tucked away the last note she'd written but never shared. "Thank you for not showing up. You showed me everything I needed to know." Back in Scottsdale, Allison sat alone in her luxury condo. A scented candle flickered near the sink, unlit for hours. She opened Instagram, drafted a quote about family being more than blood, then deleted it. No one had liked her last 5 posts. Anyway, her legacy, she was realizing, wasn't what she inherited. It was what she missed. Marjorie watched the stars blink above the lake, no sound but crickets, the water's hush, and Beverly's light breathing nearby. She thought of Walter, his laugh, his steadiness, the way he used to say, "Character isn't what you say at the mic, it's what you whisper to yourself at midnight." She closed her eyes, whispered back, "Thank you for the silence. It told me exactly who I am."